No, we're doing more. We're doing another one.
That's all we have to say about that.
Very good. Is this on? This is on. Oh, somebody gave this woman a mic. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Gate. Welcome to the first annual Shakespeare lecture. Can you all hear me? Yeah? Did you all get some food? Yeah? Did you hydrate? Yes? Okay, amazing. It is so nice to see you all, and it is so nice to see you all on a Friday night in the middle of January, coming out to a Shakespeare lecture. What are we doing tonight? How are we gathering? And how are we in conversation with one another? So André Sills has been, he is absolutely acclaimed in the world of acting in Canada, in directing. He is a creator, he's an artist, he is a voice actor, he is a director, and has been a cherished thought partner with me for a number of years, since 2018. Mm-hmm. And anytime I get stuck on something, I'm working on a play or I'm writing through Shakespeare's Guide to Hope, Life, and Learning, I say, André, can we get a Zoom? Can we just have a little conversation about a play? And he says, yes, no problem. And if André is working on a play where he's like, I just want to rumble some of these concepts, then he'll text me and say, can we have a Zoom? And we will rumble on the concept. And it is one of the most delightful joys to be able to talk about theater with somebody who is so exceptional and thoughtful and interesting, and doing that practice every day. So when he was on his way to Quebec City to hang out with Robert Lepage, I lured him here. And we have spent the last several days together in classrooms and in conversation with students, the drama department, the English department. He came and guest lectured for 2 of my classes yesterday. We joked that he had a 26-hour day. We did put you to work from 8 in the morning to midnight last night.
We finished around 12:30.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we had no business as middle-aged humans doing that, but we did it nevertheless because it's fun. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how Shakespeare gives us a guide to build creative futures tonight. And then my other... no, that's me. I'm boring. I want to talk about Sonoma. And it was really important for us to center student voice and to center the kinds of patrons we imagine are going to keep the theater vital and alive and awake for the next 50 years. And so Sonoma is your students here, elected representative for the humanities through the Student Representative Council, has been involved with the Stratford Festival since high school. In fact, took Shakespeareans just as she graduated from high school, and was, before she even started and stepped foot on campus at Bishop's, she convinced me, persuaded me. I'd never taken a 17-year-old before, and she joined Shakespeareans and has been an absolute vital contributor, co-creator, thought partner, and just joy bringer ever since. So it is so important for me to center different kinds of voices in the conversations that we're going to have tonight, but also about what a creative future looks like and how we participate in creating that. So could you please join me in welcoming these beautiful panelists? So what are we going to do? We're going to ask 3 questions of the panel, and then we're going to open up the conversation for you all. And the first question that I love asking, and I love asking all of you, and in fact, if you're in my classes, you're going to hear this prompt at some point, is tell me your origin story. How did you get here? And loosely defining here, maybe that's Lennoxville, but maybe that is as an artist, as an actor, as a creator, as a director, as a student, as a thinker, as a public humanities advocate. But how did you get here? What is your origin story? Tells us about some of the values that animate a messy, circuitous, and often interesting journey. So we're going to do some origin stories, but I really want you to think about, if I asked you what your origin story was, where would you start? And what would you tell us? And that might change day to day, but it unlocks some pretty beautiful things if you do that reflection exercise. So, Andre, would you like to tell us your origin story about how did you get here, other than I lured you? I tricked you into coming.
Hello, everyone. Well, my story, I guess, as an actor, getting onto the stage started off as going to the church that I grew up in. They did Christmas and Easter productions every year, and it's a very big church. It was a church that held 2,000 people in it, and there was one Easter production where Jesus was on stage, and this little boy ran into his arms, and then the little boy had his hands up in the air like, yeah! And I was like, I want to do that. And the next year, I was that kid. And, I think after that, the bug just kind of kept building, and I wanted to do more and more and more. And I told this story today about, like, how my mom keeps telling this story about how there was a time that I auditioned for a bigger part in one of the plays, and I didn't get it, and I came home crying. I have no recollection of that. that has apparently been blocked out of my memory. But I definitely caught the bug early, and throughout high school, trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and it just came down to, I think I want to keep acting. And so I applied to theater school, went to George Brown, and that's one of the ways I got rolling. But there is another sort of origin story that really hooks me into Shakespeare. Is I was a rugby player. And shaking your head, it's like, what? Yeah, I was a rugby player. I'm a big guy. I'm 6'2", 250 right now. But one thing that rugby really opened my mind into is what adrenaline does to the human body. Like, it almost makes you superhuman. And, Shakespeare has all these warriors, Coriolanus, Othello, Macbeth, and something that rugby really opened up for me is rugby, you have 80 minutes on the field where you can do whatever you want to those 15 guys on the other side. But once the game is done, the game is done. The other guy that is within you, that adrenaline can spark, has to stay on the field. And what was interesting with a lot of Shakespeare's plays, and some of you are starting to talk about Macbeth. Lady Macbeth challenges Macbeth to be a man. And I think his line is, I dare do all that may become a man, who dare does more is none. She's never seen that. She's heard about that guy on the field. She's never seen him at home. So when the warrior comes into the domestic, he's not supposed to be there. I know I can't bring my rugby player home. He's supposed to just stay on the field. If I bring him home, there's a problem, right? And I think that's where the warriors really start to, we tap into that instinctual place that is present in all of us, but it's just supposed to be on the field, on the battlefield, and that's its place. If it comes into the domestic, tragedy usually ensues. So that was like one of those things for me where sports and Shakespeare really started to come together for me. And yeah, I think one of the first ones that I also got to do was Aaron the Moor from Titus Andronicus. But then soon after theater school finished, I got to play Othello for the first time while I was still playing rugby. And I don't know, it was a really special opportunity to step into those words onto the stage and really take on that particular character. Yeah.
I love that. Sonoma, how's your origin story shaping up?
Well, I was thinking and I was reflecting about how I first connected with Shakespeare. And what I realized was I was 11 or 12, and I had just learned that becoming a professional performer was an option. It wasn't just like the most fun after-school activities. It was actually something that I could continue with and pursue. And ever since then, I was like, I need to get serious. I need to become a serious actor. I want to see the world. I want to know what's out there. And so one thing that I did with my family was started to research what is out there, what programs can I participate in. And we stumbled upon the Stratford Festival youth summer camps, youth training programs. And I probably watched that promotional video like every day for months on an end. And I was like, I want to do that. I want to do what they're doing. I want to be there. So signed up right away, was so excited, looking forward to it all year. And then I picked up a copy of Twelfth Night, because that was the show that we were seeing that year. And I had never read Shakespeare before. I'd never seen a Shakespeare play. I started to read it, and I was like, oh my God, what did I just sign myself up for? I do not understand what's happening. I do not understand the words. I'm from small town BC. I'm about to fly across the country. What is happening? So I went to the camp, and I was starting to feel so nervous and so underprepared and almost like alienated from this world. I was like, are we all pretending that we know what's happening, or do we actually understand what's going on?
The first one. The first one.
But then I got in the theater, lights went down, and then this world started to build and unfold on stage in front of me. And I was just absorbed. I was immediately wrapped in. It was magical and it was transformative. And I started to get the language. I started to understand what they were saying. And it felt so relevant. It felt real. It felt so human. And I left the theater, and it was just the most magical experience ever. And then I was like, okay, I get it. It's something that we do in community. We do this together. And that spark, that bug was just, I was hooked. And so I keep going back to Stratford every year, and it's the most joyful thing. And like Jessica said, it was also Stratford that brought me to Lennoxville, because you don't end up here unintentionally. And it was just another little Google search that I stumbled upon Shakespeareans. And I think it was even my mom sent an email on my behalf, and I was still in high school, and I didn't know. And I came home, and she was like, so there's this university course that you can do. And I was like, okay. But it was just, again, one of those experiences that was so magical and so built around community and that experience. And I think that's why I've stuck with theater, and that's what keeps drawing me back, and that's what I love about it.
I love that. I know you both super well, and these are all like beautiful new origin stories for me. My origin story is, I'm going to do it very quickly, but my origin story actually lives in classrooms. Can you all hear me? Yeah. So I know I've got a wonky mic. It's great. My osteopath is here, and she's like, posture. I see you. Tuck your chin. Do your alignment. Feel aligned, right, in your body and in your mind. We talk about that a lot in our classes. I guess my origin story I talk about a little bit in Shakespeare's Guide to Hope, Life, and Learning is absolutely accidental. I read as a kid, as a total nerd, everything that I could get my hands on that was not nailed down, and I never thought that was a job. I thought that was something that I loved, but I had to have a professional alibi and go and be gainfully employed and contribute to the society and make money and move out of my parents' house. And so when I went to university, didn't know much about majors or minors or anything, but I signed up to take medical anthropology, which I still don't know what that is. But my roommate did it, and it sounded kind of sciencey, and it sounded like it would give me something to, tell my parents that I was an actual human and an adult. I was not an adult, but I was faking it, still faking it, just if you're wondering. And so I went to McGill because I thought I grew up in Halifax, Nova Scotia. I'm a big city kid. I'm going to go to this big university. It's going to be, it has a big reputation. This is what I'm going to do. And so I went and I failed out spectacularly. I spent 2 years there wandering aimlessly. I bought everybody drinks at the campus bar, which is like $1 a beer. So I bought a lot of drinks. And I didn't know what I was going to do. And none of my professors had office hours. I was in classes with 600 people. I had TAs who were brand new graduate students who also didn't know what they were doing. And I fell through the cracks. And I dropped out before I got kicked out after 2 years. And I spent a year paying off my spiritual and monetary debts and did some traveling and some volunteering. And when I finally went back to university, I decided that I was privileged enough to be given access to university, and I was going to go and do law. I was going to go and save the world and represent women and children in developing nations. That was my plan. I was going to work for the UN. And so I looked at my transcript, which was littered with D's and F's and J's. J's and incomplete at McGill. I had a lot of those. J for Jessica. Super. And I looked and I thought, and I saw this one A. And it was Intro to Literature. And I'd taken it as an elective for an accident. And I looked and I was like, oh my goodness, it's the only little glimmer of gold in what is otherwise a tragic transcript. And I thought, you know what, if I got an A when I was checked out, maybe I could get some A's when I checked in so that I could go to law school. So if I could redeem myself, spend a couple of years getting A's and then get into law school, maybe I could make the world better. And so I took English literature as purely for mercenary reasons, transactional. And I started my first day back at university. I moved back in with my parents, went to St. Mary's University in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And on my first day of Intro to Theatre, Dr. Hill, who is a Shakespearean trained actor, looks exactly like Dame Judi Dench, floated into the room, didn't even say hello, just said, right, who's my Desdemona? And I levitated out of my chair. I had no control over my body and ended up lying on a linoleum floor, cold, dusty, awful, as Desdemona. And then she recited the put out the light speech as Othello is about to kill Desdemona. And
it is the cause.
It is, oh my God. And she transformed into this middle-aged British woman, transformed into Othello. And I'm looking up at her as she is imagining both her love for me and also my imminent pending death. That's a spoiler alert if you haven't seen Othello.
It's a tragedy.
Desdemona dies. But I got up from that and I was transformed. I was like, this person, and it wasn't just Shakespeare. It was Shakespeare in the classroom with somebody who understood Shakespeare, who built something in our classroom that we couldn't have done otherwise. And I was like, I want to do that. I don't know what that is, but it's Shakespeare in classroom, in conversation, together. And in our messy journeys of origin stories, this is where I ended up. So, yeah. We have a second question for the panel. And the question is, why old, dead white guys? Why read Shakespeare? Why perform Shakespeare? Why does Shakespeare matter right now in the 21st century when the world is complex and fraught and difficult? Shakespeare would never have imagined AI, right? Shakespeare did not understand what would have gone on. He certainly, I guess he predicted Trump. Richard III is a little, I think that there is lots of resonance here. But as we look at the sort of uncertainty and disruption at this particular moment, why are we going to spend time reading an old dead white guy like Shakespeare? So, André, do you want to take that first?
Well, I think what's interesting for me is that I never expected to be doing so much Shakespeare. That wasn't necessarily my plan either. But I think something else that I can bring back to another origin story that really hooked in for me was while I was doing Othello. It's funny you're talking about Desdemona and the It Is the Cause. There was a few things that kind of like even today brought me back to Othello. Tennessee Williams and Glass Menagerie. I can tell you some of those things. Something about the blow at your light, Laura, and the It Is the Cause speech. I played Tom and Othello. Those speeches are similar. I don't know. Anyways, I'm getting off topic. And so what were you saying? What's the question?
Why old dead white guy? Why Shakespeare?
Right. So for
Why
me,
Shakespeare now?
Right. So something that really happened for me while I was doing Othello that first time was my grandmother, my mom's mom, who basically raised me, was basically on her deathbed while I was in rehearsals for Othello, and was really excited to have her come and see the show. Well, before I knew she was in her deathbed, but we went to go see her, and I said that this is what I was doing. I was playing Othello right now, and out of nowhere, she's like, "Oh, I love Shakespeare." And then all of a sudden she just goes, "Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. The evil that men," and just did the whole speech of Mark Antony. And I was just like, where the hell did that come from? Never had we talked about Shakespeare in my life with her before. And like, this is somebody who like was very close to me but just having that moment happen, like, I don't know, like really brought back to me. I was like, I get it from you. So there is a history in my blood with Shakespeare. In that moment, I just knew that like there was something bigger than myself that was like a God-given hereditary thing that was like being passed down to me in that moment. She never got to see the show, but that was one of those shows that I dedicated to her. But yes, old dead white guy. Why him? Why do we keep doing it? And I think for me, like, he does a good job of revealing humanity. And if we really step into it, as opposed to playing the heroes and villains and just playing the human beings in it, it's a good sort of investigation into humans, as opposed to the world is black and white. We want it to be black and white. It's not. I think we can all tell by now that it's not. And the work that it takes to be able to do Shakespeare, like I can't just pick up the script and do it. There is a level of attention that is needed to step into the words, to tear it apart, to really understand the long sentences that Shakespeare may put together. And sometimes, as Sonoma is saying, like the words, what do those words mean? They're so big sometimes, but like once you're in it, and if I know what it is, all you need to know is that I know what it is, and you can get the gist of what that, as the listeners, as the viewers, you can go along with the journey and write it. It is the cause. It is the cause, my soul. Oh, let me not name it to you, you chase stars. It is the cause. And like that's Othello, right? Right before he kills his wife. But in his mind, he thinks that is He thinks he is doing the right thing. This is a thing he has to do. And I don't know, it's just something that, and for me as an actor, as a creator, I was always told if you can do Shakespeare, you can do anything. And I think that's true, because if you can really tear that text apart and really make sense of it for yourself and others, then everything else is easy. So that's where it comes down to for me.
I love that. Thank you. Sonoma, why Old Dead White Guy? Why Shakespeare? Why now?
Well, I think what Andre was saying about that humanity is so central. And speaking about Judi Dench, I've been reading her biography, I think I could classify it as. I recommend it to anybody. I love that book. And it was designed to be in conversation about her life and every single Shakespeare character that she's played, which is about every single one. But in it, one thing that she talks about a lot is how Shakespeare gives everything in the text. There are very few stage directions at all. It's all in there. It's in the language. It's there for us to find and excavate and play with. And she was saying how, as an actor, that's everything. He provides everything that could be needed to take that play and put it on right here at the gate. We know our scene. We know where we are. We know what our blocking needs to be. We know our relationship to those around us. And when I was reading that, I was also thinking about Dr. Emma Smith, who is a Shakespearean, and something that she says in her work is how Shakespeare gives us gaps. Shakespeare gives us gappiness that we get to find in the text. There are holes in there for us to breathe life into, and that's what keeps the text alive. That's what keeps these stories going. That's what builds these worlds. And I was holding both of these sort of almost seeming like contradictory thoughts or opinions on Shakespeare, and I was thinking about it, and I think it was at Shakespeareans and with Shannon Murray that she mentioned how Shakespeare contains so many multitudes. There are so many layers. And I think that those were two brilliant examples. We have these amazing scholars of the text and of the language, and what they found were completely different things. But that's also why he's brilliant and why we keep playing with these texts, why we keep bringing and redoing these plays, is there's so much complexity in there. And I think that just highlights our humanity, that highlights who we are as people, that highlights the construct of our society, is that there are layers. It's not black and white. It's there for us to dig and excavate and unfold before our eyes. And I think that he does a really good job in the plays and teaching us to embrace that and to understand that it's uncomfortable and it's difficult, but it's necessary. And it's what makes us human, are this polyphony of music and stories that's all there.
Oh, I love that. I forgot what I was going to say because I was like, oh, yes, I agree with both of these incredible thought partners. I guess maybe what I would add to that then is that Shakespeare is not universal. Shakespeare is deeply local. And by that I mean that you can take this text, you can take, the full Hamlet or the full Henry V or the full Julius Caesar, and you can take it into different contexts. So you could stage an Othello at Soweto in the townships of Johannesburg right before the end of apartheid. And you can equally take Julius Caesar and stage it in Washington, D.C. Right before January 6th a few years ago. And you can take those, so that they did a Julius Caesar where they actually, Julius Caesar showed up with a very, very orange spray tan. And they were performing it at a theater, 500 meters away from the steps of the Capitol in DC. And if you have gotten to Julius Caesar yet, my Shakespeare class, we'll get there. Julius Caesar is assassinated in the middle of the play. And so all of the big sponsors were like, this is Shakespeare, Shakespeare's vanilla, Shakespeare's great, all of a sudden realized that they were staging the assassination of Trump really close to the steps where he was going to have an inauguration. And all the sponsors pulled out, and it was incredibly controversial. But what it did was it sort of emphasized a particular political moment, a social and historical moment, and it amplified it so that we could see our everyday mundane just from our side eye, just stepping to one side and seeing our humanity represented and mirrored back to us in really provocative ways. And Shakespeare takes what is familiar and makes it strange, and Shakespeare takes what is strange and makes it familiar. And that decentering allows us to open up different kinds of imaginative capacities. It allows us to look at what is otherwise invisible in our everyday world and to pay attention to it, to surface it, and then to deal with it. And I think at that time right now, at this moment where we are feeling eco-grief, geopolitical instability, the violation of human rights, global warfare, that we need to be able to imagine that something different is possible. We have to step to the side to move away from that despair and disengagement and into creative and hopeful futures. And the arts, and particularly for me, Shakespeare, gives us those opportunities to imagine something different is possible, both in the horror and the heartbreak and the grief of being human, but also the beauty, possibility, and fecundity that comes with being human. So I think that Shakespeare is not universal. He's, in fact, deeply local, proximate, granular, and can show us things that are there in our everyday life that are otherwise invisible. So this kind of segues us to that third question before we open it up to the group more broadly, but this question of public purpose and the theater. The theater is very much like a university. It is publicly funded, or at least is publicly supported with taxpayer dollars, less and less, unfortunately, in Canada for higher education and the Stratford Festival. It's a place where we gather people. It's a place where we invite people into spaces and then transform together. The theater and the university are very similar in those ways, and we say that there's a public purpose to university, and we say that there's a public purpose to the theater, but we aren't necessarily articulating that to ourselves, much less taxpayers and the public sphere more broadly. And I think it's worth us sitting down and intentionally thinking about what does the theater serve for the public good at this moment? What do we need, and how does that look like for us all in this room as patrons who are going to spend political and social capital? You might not have a lot of money. You might have nothing in your bank account, but you can still be patrons. Donors spend money. Patrons spend time and investment and relationships protecting these social institutions. So at this moment in time, André, maybe you could field that question first. What is the public purpose of theater? Why do we do theater, and why does it matter?
Well, I guess this, for me, it always kind of takes me back to my origin story, my church upbringing. And, I think coming from the church, that's how I grew up. And one thing about the Christmas and Easter productions, the one thing that they were always trying to do was to change people. And I remember feeling that sort of energy from that experience back then. So now for me, the theater still continues in that same sort of, with that same sort of essence and power. I think there is power in theater to strike change, to make a possible different world. And within Shakespeare that we've been doing now for centuries, the biggest thing as we battle why this guy, why are we still doing his plays, is because we haven't solved any of the problems from over 400 years ago. Nothing has changed. we are repeating our old mistakes. We are we continue to be human, right? And we continue to mess up. And so the need for community gatherings like this, and right now, like the word that I've been using a lot in the past 2 days is electricity. There is an electricity that happens on stage with the people playing things out, and there is an electricity between what's happening on stage and the audience. And there is a power in that electricity, and that electricity can spark change. It can be a spark to a great big fire that can really make political change. And it's interesting, like as you're talking about the Julius Caesar, and like sponsors be like, ooh, that's gonna backfire on us, right? So they're fearful of what could happen with that particular sort of revolutionary idea of what Julius Caesar in DC could be. And theater has always been, somebody posted something the other day about saying that art is, at the heart of it, can be a revolutionary thing. It can really spark change, and it is usually coming from the artists, like I mentioned earlier on today as well. Apartheid in South Africa. Athol Fugard writing a whole slew of plays that were 90 minutes, 3 people, 2 to 3 people. Master Harold and the Boys, 90 minutes, really fast play, but the simple thing that this play was trying to do, there is 2 black men and a younger white boy. What that play is trying to do is trick the white South African audience into believing that these 2 black men were human beings. And it worked, and it was shut down. Revolutionary idea, right? And that's what theater can do. And that's why theater can be dangerous, because it can really change things. And I think for me, like, that's where theater can really open things up. And when I started in the theater as well, you know, I was in a place and time where the festivals were not very inclusive. You know, they said that they wanted to have a colorblind stage, but they were only kind of doing that figuratively. So the people of color were in the back holding the spears and doing things like that, but they didn't actually believe that we could do it too. So we've now come to a place now where, you know, my fight to be on stage, I feel like I've earned it, but I don't take it for granted either. You know, so I feel like for myself, the fight continues. My fight to continue to be an activist in my own right, to be on that stage, to even do Shakespeare, to do George Bernard Shaw or something else, other types of classical works. Like, I have a place in it too. As I said in earlier on, it's a God-given hereditary right that's been passed down to me from my grandmother. And so I have a need and a need to do it. And as I was saying with Tennessee Williams, Tennessee, blow out your candles, Laura, blow out your candles. Like Othello says the same thing, put out the light, put out the light, you know? So it's like, I have the right to play Tom too, you know? I don't know, it's theater has a power, and it can be political. And so sometimes for me, when I see people just going to the theater for a piece of fluff, and I understand that we need pieces of fluff sometimes, which are like a nice fluffy musical, and it's like, oh, that was great, and like the applause at the end happens, and immediately people forget what they've seen. that drives me crazy. You know, I want people to leave the theater, continuing to talk about what they've just experienced, not just right after, but weeks after the fact. And I think that's what we can do if we really step into it and really take it on. I don't know if I actually answered the question at all, but...
You did, yeah. The theater has power.
theater
It's
has power.
revolutionary.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sonoma, what do you think about that question?
I think I also feel like drawn back to that idea of an origin story and why theater, what's its power. And I think for me also the reason that I've stuck with it is that community that it builds and that it brings people together. The humanities and storytelling brings people together. It's what allows us to share and connect across disciplines, across everything. It's something there that's for us. And I think I always went to before coming here, I think I always went to the theater with the mindset of, what can I learn about the acting techniques? What do I need to do to get up there? Like, how do I need to improve and grow as a performer without necessarily being reflective about what the story was actually saying? And it wasn't until Shakespeareans when Jessica introduced that idea of patronage and the idea of being a patron and supporting the arts that it really clicked to me how important theater is, how important the performing arts are, and having something live and there and unfolding in front of us. It's so beautiful. And I think Shakespeare also, he understood that, and other early modern writers understood that. There was a Renaissance writer, Erasmus, who wrote a book called The Education of a Christian Prince, wherein he said that as a nation, we should prefer to have a bad king than a king with bad friends, because the king's council, the counselors, were so vital and so important to the stability of the nation. Having those truth tellers, those people that a king can rely on and go to for advice and help, that was what was keeping everything alive. And I think that is also what I've found in the performing arts, is that community of truth tellers, of people who want to build something every single day, build towards a brighter and more just world, and understand how the arts can be extremely transformative and powerful. And I just think that's so beautiful, and that's also a responsibility on us to maintain and uphold that. And there's a stewardship that comes with that. And it's not just in the theater, but it reflects onto our governance structures or our society. We're all active members, we're all participants, we're all stewards. And with that stewardship, it's exciting. It means that we have a voice. It means that we have power. It means that our opinions and stories can be shared, but then there's also that responsibility to be doing that work and to be sharing those stories. And I think that is the main lesson that I've learned from theater, is that it's beautiful and it's there for us, but there's also a responsibility to uphold and protect it, because what it does is incredible. It's transformative. It mirrors our society. It teaches us about the lessons of our world without us having to face them ourselves. We can see them unfold and learn from that.
That's beautiful. Thank you. And I just maybe add on to that just a little bit, that the sign of the health of a civic democracy is how much the arts are thriving. So in a dictatorship, in a regime, there are no arts. There's no theater, there's no music, there's no things that happen where people can gather and co-create, because that destabilizes the tyrants in power. And a civil society, the foundations, the cornerstone is having a thriving and flourishing arts community. And, we look at the Stratford Festival with declining funding from the Canadian and provincial governments. We see the same thing, unfortunately, happening in higher education, where we're seeing declining funding for provincial and federal envelopes. And yet those are the two institutions where we locate hope and co-creation. I'm struck by Sonoma's comments and reminded of John Dewey's essay called Creative Democracy, which he wrote in 1939. And he wrote it, it's a very short 2-page essay, but he's looking and with great alarm at what is happening in Europe in 1939, the rise of fascism, populism, xenophobia, racism, the rise of Hitler. And he said, if we treat democracy as something exterior to us, as something monolithic, as an institution beyond our everyday encounters, it dies. Democracy will die. We have to imagine a creative democracy where every single one of us in our encounters in the everyday, wherever we sit in whatever sphere of influence or sphere of control we have, is creating in real time what a creative democracy is. And I think that for me mirrors a classroom and a theater and a civil and just society. All three of these institutions ask us to co-create, ask us to have the responsibility to participate in the making of meaning. A good classroom is so unique and special that it never happens again. It is ephemeral, it is beautiful, it is made by all of the people in the room together. A beautiful theater, the same thing. It is ephemeral, it is electric, it is magical, it is non-reproducible, it is live. And the same thing with a civil and just society, that we are constantly animating and breathing life into it. And if we take our eyes off that, if we forget, if we get smug, if we disengage, then all of those institutions as we know them are going to crumble. And we see those under threat and under siege at this very moment in time. So I think there's a kind of urgency, and I certainly am locating hope right now in a campus bar in the middle of nowhere, French Canada, where we see 100+ humans showing up in January, and it's cold outside, to get warm together and to think about what a creative future looks like that we can co-create. So we're going to open the floor to questions, but I'd just like to take a moment to thank these incredible, luminous panelists of mine who just blew my mind and rewired my thinking. So everybody, if you could just thank André and Sonoma. Come up and talk to André outside of the sort of formal way in which we're doing a panel, because I think that we need to gather right now, we need to talk, we need to connect, we need to build community, we need to ask questions together in informal and formal spaces. So we've talked a lot at you. I'd love to invite you to talk to one another over the next little while, and come up and ask Sonoma and André all sorts of questions, because they are brilliant and beautiful. I know, I've talked enough. Ooh, I'm gonna start listening. I got one mouth and 2 ears, so you should listen twice as much as you talk, says my mother to me all of the time. But yeah, I just am so grateful for y'all coming and being willing to be in community and conversation with one another and with these luminaries. And I'd like you to think about, as you leave and go into the world and into your weekend, what it looks like in your own space to create a creative future. What does it look like in encounters and conversations? We're hearing lots of things about dystopian futures, right? These futurists are predicting all sorts of things. We see some politicians who are world breakers, smashing social institutions that we hold dear. It's a time of great fear and scarcity and crisis, and something different is possible. We can also live into abundance, and we can build creative futures. A dystopian future is not inevitable. Right? There's this great meme that I saw that you always wish you can go back in time, right? That Back to the Future thing, and change it. But the second best thing is change it right now, right? So what does that look like for you all as you do it? And you're all architects of a creative future, and feeling empowered to be able to go and do that work, I think, is really important, particularly at this moment where we need more hope now than ever. So please join me in thanking these incredible thought leaders and partners. And I think there's a few cupcakes and the bar is open. And so go and talk to one another because that is the most powerful thing you could do. That is transformative. Okay. Take care, everybody. Thanks.